Michael Learned and Richard Thomas entered American homes as Olivia and John Boy Walton, their bond radiating warmth, trust, and an unspoken closeness that made families everywhere believe in them. But behind the cameras, the reality was far more fragile. She carried the weight of personal struggles and the quiet exhaustion of balancing life and career. He carried the heavy gaze of a nation, still young, still learning who he was under the relentless spotlight. Together they shared moments of rare connection, laughter between takes, glances that said more than words ever could. Yet beneath the ease, an invisible tension lingered, a delicate line neither could fully name. Fame pressed against them from all sides, bending their closeness into something both sustaining and quietly strained. Their performances thrived on this depth, yet every scene carried echoes of exhaustion, pressure, and unspoken questions. America saw a perfect family, but Michael and Richard knew the fragile truth that the world would never see. Now, after 50 years of silence, Michael Learned finally reveals what she carried in her heart all this time. What was the truth behind their connection? And why did it take half a century to tell? When Michael Learned first met Richard Thomas on the set of The Waltons in 1972, there was an immediate recognition between them, subtle and unspoken. It was not the kind of connection that demanded words or explanations. It existed quietly, in glances that lingered, in moments between takes when the cameras were off, and in the small silences that carried more meaning than any line of dialogue. Michael arrived with the experience of someone who had known life's harshness, carrying her own history, her own uncertainties. Richard entered as a young actor, earnest and thoughtful, still learning how to navigate both the demands of acting and the expectations of a world watching him grow before their eyes. Their differences might have kept them apart, but instead, those differences became the foundation of something rare. From the first rehearsals, their chemistry was undeniable. Michael noticed Richard's sensitivity, the way he absorbed direction, emotion, and energy around him, and she felt an instinctive need to protect that softness. Richard in turn found in Michael a steadiness that anchored him in the midst of unfamiliar pressures. It was a bond that did not require explanation, a rhythm they fell into naturally, as if each understood exactly what the other needed without speaking. Their relationship was human before it was professional, and that authenticity radiated into every scene they shared. On screen, their connection translated seamlessly into the family dynamic audiences adored. Every scene felt lived rather than performed. A glance between mother and son conveyed understanding, love, and a depth that drew viewers into the world of Walton Mountain. Off-screen, Michael and Richard's connection offered both of them a rare comfort, a quiet understanding amid the chaos of production schedules, long hours, and the pressures of shaping a show destined to capture the nation's heart. They shared conversations about their craft, about their fears and aspirations, and about the small joys that the cameras could never capture. Even in those early months, their bond carried subtle tension, not from conflict, but from its own intensity. The closeness they felt was profound, sometimes almost overwhelming in its emotional weight. It was affection and trust intertwined, a rare alignment that made each feel seen and understood. Michael, accustomed to life's hardships, recognized the fragility in Richard's youth and instinctively offered guidance and reassurance. Richard, still discovering himself, relied on that quiet support in ways that were invisible to the world. Their connection was built on mutual respect and emotional honesty, unspoken yet undeniable. What made their bond extraordinary was its resilience under the demands of a growing production. The set was filled with noise, lights, and instructions, yet in the midst of it all they found moments of clarity, shared humor, and understanding. It was these subtle human moments that shaped the core of their performances. Directors and crew alike noticed it. The ease with which they moved together, the trust that allowed them to take emotional risks safely. By the end of their first season, it was clear that their connection was more than professional. It carried a weight, a responsibility to each other. and a depth that would shape not only their performances but the emotional heart of the series. The bond they formed would sustain them through the pressures of fame, the long days and the challenges that lay ahead, even as the world around them remained unaware of the quiet intensity of their relationship. Yet even then, a subtle question lingered, one that neither could yet answer. How long could something so delicate endure, under the relentless pressures of life, career, and expectation? The answer would unfold slowly, over the years, in ways that neither Michael nor Richard could yet imagine. As the Waltons grew into a national phenomenon, the gentle rhythm Michael learned and Richard Thomas had established began to feel the strain of attention neither had fully anticipated. Richard, still young and learning who he was, became the face of the series in ways that brought adoration, but also constant scrutiny. Interviews, fan letters, and the pressure to maintain an image weighed on him in ways that went far beyond the set. The character of John Boy demanded emotional depth, often requiring him to give more than he had in his personal life, and the world watched every moment. Fame, as exhilarating as it could be, also cast long shadows, shaping how he moved, how he spoke, and how he carried himself each day. Michael faced her own battles, different but equally demanding. She balanced the role of Olivia Walton with the responsibilities of motherhood and the emotional labor of sustaining her own life outside the studio. Long filming hours, the need to maintain her performance, and the quiet exhaustion of personal challenges all converged, leaving her drained in ways the audience could never see. She entered every scene with precision, warmth, and grace, yet behind her measured composure lay a constant effort to hold herself together, to remain present for the show, and to support Richard as he navigated the pressures of sudden fame. Despite these mounting challenges, the bond between Michael and Richard endured, though it shifted subtly. Their connection no longer existed in the unbroken calm of early filming. Time, pressure, and public attention introduced moments of distance, not in affection but in availability. Richard's emotional energy was stretched thin by the expectations of a nation, while Michael's attention was divided between her own life and the needs of the set. They still leaned on one another, still shared quiet glances and unspoken understanding, but the dynamic carried a weight neither had faced before. The long hours and intensity of production left little room for the natural ease they had once enjoyed. Scenes became more challenging emotionally, requiring layers that mirrored the complexities they were living off camera. Even casual conversations between them now occurred amid scripts, lights, and the relentless tick of time, making each moment together both precious and fleeting. In these fragments of interaction, the audience could never see the full measure of their reliance on each other, the way a shared glance could offer reassurance, or a quiet joke could sustain morale through exhaustion. Still, their professional respect and deep care provided an anchor. Michael watched Richard navigate his responsibilities with admiration, mindful of the pressures he bore. Richard recognized Michael's steadiness, drawing quiet support from her presence. Though the closeness they shared began to feel different, stretched by external demands, it retained the core of honesty, trust, and human warmth that had made it extraordinary from the start. Every day their bond informed the performances that brought millions of viewers into the world of Walton Mountain. By the midpoint of the series, it was evident that fame had reshaped, but not broken, their connection. The subtle tensions introduced by attention, expectation, and fatigue were not signs of failure, but of human endurance. They continued to care for each other deeply, to respect and rely on one another, yet the unspoken pressures weighed heavily. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant adjustment and understanding. Even amid the strain, one quiet question lingered. Could a bond built on such depth, affection, and trust survive the relentless demands of fame, or would the pressures eventually demand sacrifices neither could yet foresee? The answer would take years to reveal, unfolding in ways that tested the very foundation of their shared history, shaping both their professional paths and their hearts. As the Waltons moved into its later seasons, The bond between Michael Learned and Richard Thomas took on a complexity that was almost invisible to the outside world. On screen, they remained the perfect mother and son, their connection seamless, warm, and convincing. Behind the scenes, however, their emotional intimacy carried layers that neither had fully articulated. It was a quiet tension, not born of discord, but of depth. They cared deeply for each other, relied on one another in ways both sustaining and heavy, and shared moments of understanding that could not be explained to anyone else. Michael had always sensed Richard's sensitivity, the way he absorbed the pressures of the role and the world around him. He was young, facing fame while still learning to navigate life's complexities, and she instinctively offered support and guidance. Their connection became a safe harbor, a place where each could be honest without fear. Richard, in turn, admired her steadiness, drawing comfort from her presence in moments of exhaustion or doubt. The intimacy between them was human, profound and essential, not romantic, but emotionally vital. It was the kind of bond that shapes a person quietly, leaving traces in both their work and their life. Even so, emotional closeness can carry weight. The more they relied on each other, the more fragile the balance became. Michael's own life demanded attention, leaving her stretched between personal responsibilities and the emotional labor required on set. Richard's rising fame placed new pressures on him, subtly shifting his availability. The bond that once flowed naturally now required careful attention, a quiet negotiation of time, energy, and boundaries. They never spoke of these pressures, yet both felt them in small ways: a pause too long in conversation, a glance filled with unspoken questions, a touch of fatigue behind a smile. Their unspoken understanding became a double-edged gift. It strengthened their performances, giving scenes the depth, warmth, and authenticity that audiences loved. Yet it also created an emotional tension that was difficult to carry. Each moment together was precious, yet fleeting. In the quiet of a shared glance or a whispered word, they acknowledged the weight of their mutual care, but they never defined it. That restraint, paradoxically, made the bond stronger, preserving its honesty while holding it delicately between them. Michael noticed that the emotional energy she and Richard shared was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was not friendship alone, nor simple professional respect. It was a rare alignment of souls, a human recognition of one another's vulnerabilities and strengths. Richard, too, sensed the gravity of their connection. He understood that Michael's support allowed him to carry the pressures of fame without faltering, and he cherished that steadiness in ways words could not capture. Their relationship became a quiet foundation, the emotional core of the show, invisible to millions yet vital to both of them. Even as the seasons progressed, the unspoken conflict, if it could be called that, lingered. It was not resentment or disagreement, only the natural tension of two deeply feeling people relying on each other amid the demands of life, work, and expectation. The closeness that had once been effortless now required careful balance, a constant awareness of what each could give without overwhelming the other. And yet, despite this delicate tension, they continued to care, to trust, and to support each other in ways that shaped every scene they shared. By this point, the truth was clear to both of them, even if it could not be spoken. Their bond was extraordinary, formed through mutual respect, shared vulnerability, and emotional honesty. But extraordinary bonds, no matter how carefully held, are tested by time, pressure, and the relentless pace of life. The quiet question that hovered in the background was unavoidable. How long could a connection so deep survive without change? And what sacrifices would it demand of both hearts? The answer was still years away, waiting silently in the shadows of their lives. When Richard Thomas made the decision to leave the Waltons, the world saw it as a natural step in the career of a rising star. To fans, it was a milestone, a newsworthy change in the cast of a beloved show. Behind the cameras, however, the impact was profoundly personal. For Michael Learned, it was a shock that resonated far beyond professional disruption. She had relied on Richard not just as a co-star, but as a quiet presence she trusted. a companion in the demanding rhythm of production. His departure created a void that no script could fill, a silence in the space that had once been alive with shared understanding, humor, and subtle care. Michael's days after the announcement were marked by a mixture of practical adjustments and emotional weight. Scenes had to be recalibrated, dialogue rewritten, and a new dynamic established with the cast. The production continued, as television always must, yet the emotional vacuum left by Richard's absence was unmistakable. The on-set warmth that had been carried by their unspoken trust felt thinner, the ease between scenes harder to find. She moved through her work with professionalism, delivering every line with the same care as before, yet the quiet ache of loss lingered behind her eyes. Richard's departure also forced Michael to confront emotions she had long kept private. Their bond, built over years of shared work and personal reliance, was not something easily replaced. She had depended on his steadiness, his sensitivity, and the effortless understanding that had made the show's family feel real. Without him, she carried both the weight of maintaining that authenticity for the audience and the private grief of losing a connection that had become central to her daily life. The role of Olivia, once shared in a subtle, unspoken partnership, now rested more heavily on her shoulders. Even amidst the practical challenges, Michael never allowed bitterness to shadow her thoughts. She understood, at least intellectually, why Richard had made his choice. He was growing, changing, stepping into new opportunities, and the timing aligned with the natural course of life. Yet understanding did not erase the emotional impact. She experienced a quiet, human ache, an absence felt in every glance across the set, every empty space in rehearsals, every scene now performed without the presence of someone who had shaped its emotional core. The crew and cast also noticed the shift. Though none could articulate it fully, Michael's professionalism remained impeccable, her care for the ensemble unwavering, yet those who watched closely could sense the subtle difference. It was not dissatisfaction or anger, only a quiet, poignant change. The intimacy that had flowed so naturally between her and Richard was no longer present, leaving both the show and her own heart to adjust to the new reality. Through all of it, Michael continued to carry herself with warmth and grace, preserving the spirit of Olivia Walton for audiences who remained unaware of the personal dynamics at play. She leaned on colleagues, on routine, and on her own strength, navigating the dual pressures of personal loss and professional responsibility. Her bond with Richard had been built on mutual care and trust, and its absence highlighted how rare and sustaining it had been. By the time the transition settled, one truth remained undeniable: Richard's departure was not a betrayal, nor a simple career move. It was a shift that demanded resilience and emotional endurance. Michael learned to hold the space he left behind with quiet acceptance, though the experience left an imprint on her heart that she would carry for decades. The lingering question was no longer about work or fame or expectation. It was about what it meant to lose someone so central to daily life, and how the bonds we form can echo silently across 50 years. 50 years after the Waltons first brought them together, Michael finally spoke the truth she had carried quietly for decades. It was not a tale of scandal or betrayal, but a story of gratitude, reflection, and the enduring power of human connection. The bond she shared with Richard Thomas had been profound from the very beginning, one built on trust, understanding, and the kind of emotional intimacy that leaves an imprint long after the cameras stop rolling. What she had felt then, and what she carries even now, is not easily captured in words, yet it shaped every choice, every performance, and every day she spent portraying Olivia Walton. She recalls the early days with clarity, remembering the small gestures that revealed Richard's sincerity, the way he listened when she offered guidance, the way he absorbed emotion without defensiveness, the quiet thoughtfulness in his eyes between takes. Michael saw in him not just a young actor, but someone who carried the world differently, someone who trusted her in ways that transcended the script. She had offered support, steady presence, and gentle encouragement. And in return, he gave her the gift of trust and vulnerability that elevated every scene they shared. Their connection had never been about fame, or recognition, or the applause of audiences. It was about two human beings recognizing each other fully, honestly, and without pretense. Richard's departure, though difficult, became part of the narrative she had to carry in silence. The years following his exit were filled with reflection, sometimes quiet sorrow, sometimes appreciation. She understood the necessity of his choice, and yet the absence of his presence left a subtle emptiness she could never articulate fully at the time. That void, however, taught her about resilience and the enduring significance of bonds that remain unbroken even when circumstances shift. She learned that closeness can persist across time and distance, that love and respect do not require constant proximity, and that the most meaningful relationships often exist quietly, unseen by the world. Now, with the perspective of decades, Michael's revelation is gentle yet powerful. She speaks of Richard not as a former co-star or distant figure from the past, but as a formative presence in her life. One whose honesty, sensitivity, and humanity shaped her both as an actress and as a person. She acknowledges the gravity of the connection they shared, the depth of mutual care, the strength it lent her in challenging moments, and the quiet joy it brought in the simple act of being understood. There is no dramatization, only truth, a recognition of the rare gift of human intimacy carried in trust and shared experience. What makes this truth resonate is its universality. It is about the people who touch our lives, sometimes for years, sometimes in fleeting moments, leaving marks that endure long after the circumstances change. Michael's story with Richard exemplifies how bonds formed in youth can shape the rest of a life, how gratitude and reflection can coexist with loss and change, and how the human heart carries what is meaningful even when it must do so quietly. Her revelation is not about reopening old wounds, but about honoring a connection that was always real, profound, and lasting. For 50 years she held these feelings privately, guarding their significance, while living fully in the roles and responsibilities before her. Now she shares them openly, offering a glimpse into the heart behind Olivia Walton, and the human truth behind the woman audiences only knew on screen. Her bond with Richard Thomas is a testament to the quiet power of understanding, the endurance of trust, and the invisible threads that link two lives across decades. At last, the truth is spoken, tender and honest, and it illuminates the depth of a connection carried not for fame, but for love, respect, and shared humanity. Looking back across 50 years, the story of Michael Learned and Richard Thomas is one of connection, resilience, and the quiet power of human intimacy. They were cast as mother and son, yet their bond went far beyond the roles they played. It was built on trust, mutual respect, and the rare ability to truly see one another, even in the busiest, most demanding moments of their lives. Their connection shaped the heartbeat of the Waltons, grounded its performances in authenticity, and left an indelible mark on both their hearts. Richard's departure was a turning point, a moment of loss that tested Michael's endurance, yet it also revealed the depth of what they had shared. In the decades that followed, she carried that bond quietly, reflecting on its significance, learning from its strength, and understanding its lasting influence. When she finally speaks the truth, it is not a revelation of drama, but a testament to gratitude, reflection, and the enduring impact of relationships formed in the most ordinary, yet profoundly human, of circumstances. Through their story, we see that bonds forged with care and honesty remain with us, shaping our lives in ways the world may never witness. For more emotional stories, check out this video.